All right, it looks like we are live, and welcome to the first ever live stream of the Germany Experience podcast. This is a whole new world for me. I've got a whole bunch of tech happening here that I don't know what's going to happen. So hopefully it all works out. Hopefully you can hear me fine. Hopefully you can hear everyone that I'm going to be speaking to on the line. But before we get into that, let's make it feel a little familiar, shall we? Let's do this. It's the Germany Experience podcast, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. And I'm not sure if that actually worked or not. That was supposed to be the theme music. I don't know if that actually came across. But welcome to the show. The whole reason that we're doing this live stream is because it was the 1-year anniversary of the Germany Experience. On May 29th, 2019, the very first episode went out. And here we are. A year later. How about that? So I'm going to be doing a little quick question and answer session later on. So if you do have questions for me to answer, write them down in the comments. And coming up on the show later on, my personal top 5 highlights of the year. I'm going to be doing that. We're going to have a listener Q&A session, as I said. Then I'm going to be talking with Nina, who was the guest on the Faschings episode. And then I've got some thank yous to say. So that's all that's coming up. If all the tech works and everything. But first, last year this time, I was starting a podcast, just starting it out. I hadn't got any episodes ready. I wasn't even sure of what the format of the show was going to be. And of course, I needed guests, and I didn't know who to have on as guests because, who's going to go on a podcast that doesn't exist before? And at that time, I'd just done a 5-part podcast series with Dwight Stephen Boniecki, who was, he's not dead, he's still alive. He is the writer of several books. He is a movie director who did Searching for Skylab, the documentary about the Skylab space station, which was a space station in the 70s. So obviously, he was an obvious choice for my very first guest. So how fitting is it that here we are 1 year later, and my first guest on my first live show is Dwight Stephen Boniecki. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Just to let you know, the check didn't clear yet, so I don't know actually why I'm here.
The check didn't clear after a year. That's weird.
I know, what the hell? Yes.
That is strange. I
need that 20 cents like you won't believe.
I need to speak to the bank about that, Dwight. It's on its way. And I guess we just...
Yes, they laughed at me. They did. They laughed.
We're just running up a bill here because we've got another appearance on my show. So you're going to have to wait another year for this bill.
Well, I'm used to it. So, look. Let's all jokes aside. It's great to be back on the show, and I can't believe it's already a year.
No, I can't either. It's gone so quickly. And do you know how many guests I've had since you were on, Dwight?
I don't know. How many guests have you had?
42, Dwight. 42. You were number 1 of 43 guests in total.
That's pretty amazing. That's nearly 1 per week.
Yeah. I'm pretty promiscuous with my guests, as I would say. So I must
learning by doing, I'd imagine too, with all the tech and that.
So when I spoke to Dwight and said I want to talk to him on the Facebook show, I was saying, please keep the dirty talk down to a minimum because he is Australian. He does have a filthy mouth. But I see that you're very good at the innuendos, Dwight.
What are you talking about?
So now that I've got you on the line, I have to ask you, how are things going with Searching for Skylab?
They're going actually very well. We've had a very a rocky road, like I think we were talking about last year.
Yeah.
And we had to take a step back and just let the whirlwind of the whole Apollo 11 50th anniversary blow over. And that's a nail-biting experience because you're watching a film that's getting all the accolades and you're like, but I've got one too.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't our time. And just the other day, we did a celebration of the 47th anniversary of the launch of SL2, which was the mission that actually saved Skylab after it had its problems on launch. And we had a variety of guests show up, astronaut families, astronauts, people from NORAD who monitored the space station as it crashed into Australia. We had people from Australia talking about their experiences working at the museum and dealing with the artifacts. So It's just
Pretty
gone
cool.
insane.
So you're like a real live director. That is pretty cool. And I can tell you, not many of my other guests have had astronauts in the last year. So there is that. Dwight, I must ask you, you've got a YouTube show that's starting pretty soon, or has started. I think it
has started, right? Yes.
Yeah.
When you do a search for it, it ranks at about number 570 on a list of 569.
Oh no!
So it's unfortunately way down the list. So if any of your listeners are thinking, "Wow, what can I watch?" If you can find it, the new show is called iSkylab, and don't worry, you don't need to sit there for 20 hours watching me prattle on about Skylab. It's only 12 minutes.
Okay. Concise, Dwight. Very concise.
That's right. And, based on the documentary or the film that was never completed called I, Claudius, back in the 30s, I think it was. And there was a really cool documentary made, the most famous documentary never made. And then, of course, there's I, Robot, which was also a play on the title that we decided to take, or the other way around. Our title plays on both those things, because for me it's like making Skylab a person and also giving it that innuendo for science fiction from the iRobot title. And basically what we do is we take all the little bits of anecdotal information that people ask after they've seen the film, searching for Skylab. They go, "Oh, what about blah, blah, blah?" And I'll say, ideally we should make a show. And that's what this one is about, just to elaborate on more or to elaborate in depth a lot more than what is shown in the film because of time constraints.
Very cool. So definitely check that out. And Dwight, I really appreciate you coming on this live show. And you're going to come on the podcast at some point again. So definitely keep that in mind.
But then I have to watch my language. No.
No, you don't have to watch the language. It's just for the live show. You have to watch the language.
Oh God! Because you edit it all out on the pre-recorded one, right?
Cool,
so
Dwight.
it basically goes like this: "Hello, I'm Dwight. See you later."
Yeah,
exactly.
Dwight, thanks so much for joining, and we'll
not a problem.
Talk again. First guest ever.
Best of luck with the show. I will be unable to listen. I've got to get to sleep. I've got an early shift tomorrow, so I trust that you've got everything working properly.
I hope so. I don't know if people can hear this at all, but hopefully it's all working. Thanks, Dwight. We'll talk again.
No worries. See you, mate. Bye.
All right. And that's something I wanted to say as well on this show is thank you to all those early guests who let me interview them before there was even an episode, or before there was even an episode of this podcast out there. There was Dwight, of course, who we've just spoken to now. And then there was someone named Anna Noakes-Schultz. Her episode only came out much, much later, but I reached out to her in the beginning when there was no podcast, when I saw a post of hers on Facebook, and she was talking about this TEDx talk that she did. So I was like, I just sent her a message out of nowhere, literally unsolicited, and I said, "Hey, Anna, would you like to be on a podcast that doesn't exist?" And she said yes. She came, and that answer came within half an hour. And then, of course, there was also Laurie, who spoke about bilingualism, and then there was also Noor from Pakistan. All of these people came when there was no podcast, and what they did, they didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it at the time, but what they did was actually just they raised my confidence level, and they made me realize I could do this. So that was pretty cool. So a massive thank you to all of those very early guests for trusting me and also being so interesting, because that's the thing about this podcast. The guests do all the work. I don't do it. I just ask them questions, and they have to be interesting. So thanks to my guests. All right, so let's get into the listener Q&A. I've been collecting some questions from people over the past few weeks, and I have some questions that I'm going to answer now. If you have more, you can put them in the chat, and I can hopefully see them because the chat scrolls by pretty quickly. But here we go. So the first one was something I was asked in a mail the other day. Which episodes of my podcast do I recommend new listeners listen to first? All of them. Listen to all of them. That's why we're here. But if you're going to start somewhere, I picked a few episodes that you can start with. It doesn't mean that they're better than the other episodes. It doesn't mean that they're my favorite episodes. It just means these are the episodes that maybe give you a good idea of what the show is about straight away, and you can decide if you like it or not. But you're going to like it. I know you're going to like it. So for newer listeners, of course, the first one you can start with is the first episode, which was my episode explaining my background. And it's called My Expat My expat journey or my expat story. Doesn't matter. Go to the first episode in the feed, and that's the one that you should listen to. Then there was, I've just mentioned it, Laurie from the USA, who was episode 6, and she spoke about learning German, teaching English, and raising bilingual kids. And that was definitely a great episode. And then there was Shannon from the USA in an episode called Church Bells and Bicycles. And this is an episode that so many people, guests who come on the show, people who've listened to the show, often talk about. So I think it struck a chord with a lot of people. So I would definitely recommend listening to that episode. And of course, we would have to mention the episode I did with Nicole of the Expat Cast, discussing German stereotypes, because it was a great discussion and very, very funny. And the other episode, How Germany Changed Us, which was an episode I did with Gibran from Pakistan. And he runs, of course, the Desi in Wonderland YouTube channel. So that was the episodes that you should listen to first. Fiona, who I think is in the Facebook chat right now, I'm not sure. I did see her show up there briefly, but Fiona asked me on the Facebook group, the German Experience Facebook group, what made you pick up the mic? So that's not such an easy question to answer, but what made me pick up the mic was that I always wanted to be on radio somehow as a teenager. As a teenager, I actually had 3 big dreams, which were happening most of the time in my brain. The first one was I wanted to be a writer for a long time. Second one was I wanted to be a musician in a band. And the third one was I wanted to be on radio. And with that one, I can remember often just recording my voice as a teenager. Weirdly enough, in my bedroom, just random things, doing fake sports broadcasts. Or yes, I did not have a life. I was a nerd. It's okay to admit that now. And then I can remember walking along the beachfront where I grew up, and or just walking to the stores. And I can remember talking to myself as if I was on the radio, pretending to be a DJ. So yes, awkward teenage years. But that kind of went away when I started working, because as you know, you start careers don't go the way that you want them to. You get further away from whatever dreams that you had. And the whole being on radio thing went away. But then later on, I fell in love with podcasts. And I always had the thought, maybe I could do that. Maybe I bet I could do that. And I just never did. But recently I changed careers and I got to do a bit of YouTube work in front of the camera. And that made me realize, hey, maybe I can do this. And plus, I just love speaking to people and getting their stories, finding out more about them. And so I decided, okay. And then I still didn't start it for a while. But then in 2019, I had a personal crisis happen in my life. And it was something that I needed a distraction for. And so I just started that podcast that I always wanted to start. And here we are 1 year later. And yeah, it's been quite a ride. So yeah, Fiona, that's the long answer of why I picked up the mic, and I wouldn't be surprised if people have all left after that long story. So let's go to the next question, and this is from Steph Fuccio, who is also in the chat. I can see her there, and she asked, also on the Facebook group, which 2 guests would you want to talk to each other? And that I know that's a very, very easy answer for me, because the 2 guests that I would want to talk to, we've actually discussed this also on the German Experience Facebook group. Shannon, who I mentioned in an early episode, she suggested that, or her story was about her moving to Germany and the freedom that she felt in Germany as opposed to living in the USA. And another Steph, not Steph Fuccio, but there was a Steph that came on the show who lives in the USA now, and she was a German, and she said she was surprised to hear. She was surprised. Oh, Steph Cook is in the chat. She just wrote, great question. Welcome to the chat, Steph Cook. The German living in America, found freedom going in the other way. And Shannon made a comment on the Facebook group, and then I just thought this would be a great discussion to have on a podcast. So those were the 2 guests that I would love to talk to each other. And I've already reached out to both of them, and hopefully at some point we'll make that episode happen where they can talk about the freedom that they found, but moving in different directions. So that's that question. Thanks, Steph Fuccio, for that. And of course, that's Steph Fuccio from the Geopats podcast. And another question that I get, and this is not just from one person, it's from several people, it's how do you find the time So the answer to that is I just don't sleep. I have a very good, I deal with sleep deprivation very well. Honestly, though, evenings after 8:30 when the kids are in bed is when I usually do it. And that's podcast time is about 8:30 till around about midnight on most evenings. And it's definitely a sacrifice doing that because I give up watching Netflix. I give up playing video games, both things that I love, to work on the podcast. And that has been, it sounds bad, it sounds weird to say that it's a difficult choice, but it is a difficult choice because, it's very difficult when you get home from work then to know that, okay, instead of just sitting on a sofa and just watching Netflix, I've got to actually do some work. And believe me, editing is work. I hate editing. But it's been rewarding beyond words. And there are times when I do need to take a step back because I've got a day job, I've got 3 kids, and then I'm doing this in the evenings. And I do need to take a step back from time to time to prevent some kind of burnout. But yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world. And I see there's Brian Behrens in the chat, and he's got a little crying face because he's my PlayStation partner, my brother and PlayStation partner. And so I know that he misses not having me as a PlayStation partner. So yeah, and Steph Cook is saying, oh yes, I love editing. She's of course got a podcast. I forgot to mention that. Sorry, Steph. Steph Cook has also got a podcast. There's 2 Stephs in the chat and they both got podcasts. And Steph Cook's podcast is called Transcontinental Overload. So definitely check that out. And I was recently a guest on that podcast. So definitely go and check that out. Okay, so the last question that I have came from Rogi, who emailed me. And he asked, how has COVID-19 impacted your podcast? Are your numbers down? And do you find more or less time to do the podcast with all the children at home? Well, Rogi, as I said, most of the podcast work happens when the kids are sleeping anyway, so that doesn't change. What does change is how exhausted I am by the time it comes to doing the podcast, because I'm working from home, but at the same time, we're kind of taking care of 3 kids together. And then the whole mealtime, bedtime run is absolutely crazy. And then eventually, when they get to bed, I am wrecked. So it's just made me a little more tired. It hasn't really impacted the podcast. To answer the question about, are your numbers down? My numbers were down a lot in March and April, but they've bounced back really surprisingly well in May. So it's very exciting to see that that's happening, because it just gives me a bit of hope that things are, at least in Germany, slowly going back to normal, returning back to normal a little. I think people are listening to podcasts again. I think people are starting to think of moving to Germany again. I've been contacted by a few people who have thoughts of coming here. So I think it make me feel good, because not only are my numbers up, which is always good, but it shows that things are maybe getting back to some kind of normal. So that is it for the question and answers. I do want to see if I can reach someone named Nina. Let me give her a call here. And yes, that is the obnoxious Skype ringing. And Nina's on the line. Hello
there.
Nina. So I wanted to talk to you, Nina, because, and welcome. Thank you for making the time and coming to the show, by the way.
Of course, you're welcome.
Yeah. So Nina was on the Faschings episode, the carnival episode that I did. And I wanted to get you on because, first of all, I'm glad you came on because you were recovering from surgery this last week, weren't you?
Yeah. So if I don't smile a lot, that's the reason, because it's still a bit hard.
A bit hard to smile. And you couldn't talk, which, knowing you, must have been an absolute nightmare.
It was terrible because, yeah, I do talk a lot. I do talk fast. I have a comment for everything.
Yes, you do.
And if you can only use, it's not even sign language because I don't speak sign language. So it's just pointing at stuff and going like, yeah, it was 3 painful days. And I'm not talking about the pain I had. I'm talking about my emotional pain.
I'm almost sad that I missed that, Nina.
Oh, no, it's good.
So you were on one of my biggest episodes to date, which was released just before Carnival time in Germany. And we spoke about the Carnival, and the episode just kind of blew up. I don't know why, but it went through the roof, and it was, it was like getting downloads 3-4 times within a week of what I usually get. And I don't know if it was you, Nina,
I'm associating it to my mom because she literally shared it with everyone.
With everyone, the whole world. Like, she is pretty well networked.
She is.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just in case it was you, I have to get you back on the show again. So just in case. And this episode also turned out to be a bit controversial because I got a one-star review on iTunes for it because people said I was whining about fashion and that I should go back to South Africa. Do you think it was that bad?
No, like I wouldn't call it whining what you did. I think we were comparing viewpoints, and I mean, I knew what you planned to do because you told me that you want a fashion hater and a fashion lover in a podcast.
Exactly.
And since I know I love fashion, I knew which side you're going to be on.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But it was such a fun talk. So we seriously do have to get you back on the podcast because a few people also told me like how much they liked having Nina on the show. So you're definitely.
I have a request. I want to do it with Olivia.
You want to do it? Okay. So Olivia is my daughter, and for those who don't know, Olivia, I've been getting her to the mic and recording some discussions I have with her, and maybe I should release some of those at some point. It's
hilarious.
I can imagine you and Olivia in a podcast episode. That would actually be fun.
We would be a great team.
Yeah, you would. You would. I would be out of a podcast job though. I can.
You would. Yeah.
So Nina, I just wanted to call up and say thank you so much for being on one of my best performing episodes yet. And before you go, actually, I wanted to tell you that one of my favorite Instagram accounts is that of your hamster.
Yeah. It's called Sissy Hamster or Sissy the Hamster. I don't even remember. And I actually only I hate people who spam you. I love animals, but there's a certain limit. And if you're following people on Facebook and Instagram, it's usually about the people and not their pets, children, whatever. So people kept requesting, like, how's your hamster doing? And so I was sending the same videos and pictures to 10 people. I was like, you know what? I'll just upload them and go for it.
Yeah. I love it. I get so excited when I see that Sissy is posting new stories or posts.
Have I uploaded a video of her walking on grass? So
yes, you did. I think it was a story. I think you made it a Sissy.
I should upload the video because due to the surgery, I'm staying at my parents' place, and so that my hamster doesn't starve, I took her with me.
Right.
And
good idea.
Of course, my parents have a garden, and so we took her outside, and I was like very curious how she would react to real grass.
Yeah.
And it's funny, she kind of does this walk. It's cute.
It is a great. If I can highly recommend that page. If you maybe put the page name in the comments of the live chat.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yes, Sissy the hamster is my favorite, and she's very grounded. There's not a lot of vain selfies that she does, and she's just very grounded hamster.
She's a very chill hamster. Yeah.
Nina, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See ya. So that was Nina, and yeah. So the next part of the show, I thought I'd just look back over the last year and look at some highlights of mine of having what it's like to have a show, and what the best things about having a podcast have been for me. So I've got, as any good content person knows, you've got to do the top 5 of. So this is my top 5 highlights of the last year. So the first one is what was most amazing to me. What has been the most amazing to me is getting to know so many strangers, absolute strangers. It was so strange to me in the beginning, and very early on. My first stranger who I had a face-to-face interview was actually Shannon, coming back to Shannon. And her name was given to me by Laurie, and she said, this is a very interesting person and you might want to interview her. So I did. But then I can remember I put all my equipment in the car. I drove out to where Shannon lives, and I parked across the road from where her address was. And I just sat in the car for 5 minutes going, because here was an absolute stranger. I didn't know anything about her. I literally just knew her name. We'd spoken for 5 minutes on the phone. And I was like, now you're going to walk into this person's house, sit down at a table and ask them their life story, to go through all of this stuff with you. And I was just like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And the podcast was still in the early phases. And it was absolutely crazy. And then after 5 minutes, I just took my equipment, went inside, and it just flowed and it just happened. But that's one of the highlights of me, is getting to hear the stories of so many people and people that I don't know. And it's a unique opportunity that you get in doing a podcast like this, where you get to sit down with someone and you're allowed to ask them intimate questions without making small talk or without having, you just get straight to it and say, what are your emotions about moving to Germany? What has been difficult, and so on. And that's been an incredible experience. And what I've also loved is having these strangers become long-term connections. So it's friendships that I've made that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And that has been, I think, something that I didn't picture about having a podcast, was just that level of making friends with complete strangers. Number 2 of my highlights, getting to have meaningful discussions with people that I do know. So I've had a few friends of mine on the show, a few colleagues, and that's also been great. For example, talking to Rafael, my friend from Brazil, and we got to have a heart-to-heart about what it was like for him to lose his father and what it was like to be so far away from him here in Germany, and his father was in Brazil when he passed away. And talking to Natalie quite recently about her leaving Germany, which was also a bit of a sad topic for me because I like Natalie, and it was hard to see her go. So I got to, that's also been great, is to have these meaningful discussions with friends, and even in some cases I learned things that I didn't know about them before. Like recently, Greg, the Californian, I learned that he suffers from anxiety, and I didn't know that before. It was just a new bit of information. So that has been amazing. Then the other thing, and this is one of the things that keeps me going, is the little messages of support that I get. And it so happened that in about week 7 or week 8 after starting the podcast, I was very, very close to quitting, seriously close to quitting. And it was because I underestimated how much work goes into doing a podcast. There's the booking of the guests. There's putting it, recording is the easiest part, and then there's editing, getting everything right, publishing it, and then there's social media. You're posting it on Facebook, and you're trying to market it the whole time. There's a lot of stuff. It's almost like a full-time job. And at that time, I was feeling like no one's even listening. What's the point? And I was very close to, like I said, about 7 or 8 weeks after starting. And out of the blue, and I wish I could find this message now. I got a message on either Instagram or Facebook, and I can't remember where it was, of someone just saying, "Hey, I'm thinking of moving to Germany sometime in the future, and I love your podcast. It's given me so much information and so great to listen to. Keep going." And I remember that it said, "Keep going." Like I said, I wish I had this message, but I just can't find it anymore. And that just flipped things around for me on like almost a split second change. I went from completely defeated, thinking this is literally going to be my last episode, what I was doing, to saying, wow, I know I need to keep going there. And yeah, so that was hugely important for me. And then it started happening that every now and then I get little messages from random people, or somebody makes a recommendation of the podcast, or somebody leaves a review on the podcast. And those are the things that keep me going, because, it's nice to know people are out there, and people are not just listening, but they're enjoying listening, and they enjoy listening enough to let you know that they're enjoying listening. So that is incredible. And very cool. Number 4, being able to raise money for a good cause. So if you remember in December, Nicole from the Expat Cast and I hosted a charity challenge, Fegi Padfo charity challenge. And now we only raised 350 euros together for our charities. It's not much, but it was really cool to be able to do something like that with a podcast. And we'll be doing it again this year. I think we're going to do it bigger and better this year with more podcasters. But it was just a massive thing to be able to say that this thing that I started, I was able to raise not a lot of money, but a bit of money for charity. So that's very cool. And then number 5, a little bit based on what I said earlier, is the sense of community, the feeling of community. And I've seen a few instances where this show has brought people together. Like a case in point, Stephanie Cook and Shannon. I think Stephanie reached out to Shannon. At least I think that's what Shannon said. And I know a lot of people have also reached out to Shannon as well, based on her being on the podcast. And also sometimes I'm surprised at who knows who, and it's just great to see the community coming together. And also, like I said, working together with Nicole and the Germany Experience Facebook group, which now has grown to over 200 members. And hopefully there's a sense that we're not in this alone. This whole thing about moving to Germany, going through what we're doing, going through what we're going through. And that's been a huge thing for me, is that whole sense of community. Right. So that is it. Victoria Stephanie saying I'm a superstar, Sean. You're too kind. Oh, Nina's also saying you rock. You guys are way too kind. Way too kind. Thank you for the kind messages. So this has been fun. I'm pretty much at the end of this live show. I just wanted to get on and say it's been a great year, and I've got a lot of things planned. I've got such cool guests planned for the next month or 2 months at the moment. I'm very excited for these episodes to get out. And I'm really looking forward to the next few years of this podcast to see what we're going to do and how much it can grow, and the community, just focusing on the community. And before I wrap up here, I just want to say thank you to some people. So thank you to everyone who obviously, thank you to the listeners of the podcast, because without you guys, there would be no podcast. And so that means a lot. And thank you to those listeners who listen every week. That continuously blows my mind that there are people out there who listen every week, and it means a lot to me. And I just see Michael Silverman's name popped up on the chat, and he is someone who I know listens to a lot of the episodes. I don't know if he listens to it every week, but he definitely listens to a lot of the episodes, because we often have chats afterwards. And he was a guest, of course. I think the episode called Article 116. And then I also, like I said, I appreciate the people. I want to thank the people who message me, take the time to message me, let me know that they're enjoying the show. And I think most of all, I want to thank my wife, who understands a lot. She has to understand a lot, because there were times where, to get good acoustics, this room is it echoes a lot, and I haven't treated it yet. I don't have acoustic panels yet. So I bought these. I should have brought them out to show you. I bought these sort of clothes rack things, which I hung moving blankets over, and there was 4 of them, and I would create like a little mini studio for me here in the basement. And my wife was horrified because it would block the light coming in from the window, and she was not pleased about that, and I can understand why. And also, she understands when I've got a guest that at 8:30 I'm going downstairs because I've got an interview with someone. And she just puts up with a lot, plus all this equipment. I mean, buying microphones, putting it somewhere, and everything. So I think a massive thanks goes out to my wife, because she's been amazingly supportive about this whole endeavor. Yes, so thank you for joining. Thanks to everyone who sat through this. And yeah, I can't say thank you enough, but thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm really hoping that we can do more live shows like this, maybe once a month, but we'll see. I'll have to see how it all pans out. Thanks for joining. Have a good weekend, and listen to a new episode on Monday, of course, as always. See ya.